everyone. Welcome back to Underreported Stories, where I cover the news that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News fail to report or don't report on enough. And today we have a lot of new friends. I saw my subscriber count has gone up like 3,000 people since the other day. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. Our whole MO here is that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I put out about a 45 to 50-minute video covering all the underreported stories, again, you wouldn't hear on mainstream news. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll either put out a random video that I, came up with the day of, some clips, some man on the street interviews. It's kind of a hodgepodge. It's just all Chrissy Clark things. So welcome to the channel if you're new. I'm very glad you are here. For those of you in the listening audience wondering why the heck did Chrissy's channel just all of a sudden get some more subscribers? If you haven't had the chance, I really encourage you to go watch my video from yesterday, Wednesday, December 11th, titled, "Is This Why Brett Cooper Really Left?" Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to hit the mic. I addressed, obviously, everything that was going on with Daily Wire talent Brett Cooper exiting the Daily Wire, but also in part of my legal disclosure of that episode, I revealed some information about myself that I think the internet has found interesting. Anyway, let's get into the bones of our show, because Tuesday, we started the show by talking about all the facts we knew about Luigi Mangione, the alleged United Healthcare assassin. And after I posted about just the facts we know, I very quickly learned that there's a bipartisan conspiracy theory that this is all an alleged FBI setup. Luigi Mangione is actually not guilty, allegedly. That's kind of what the theory goes by. So, in an effort to do my conspiracy theorist good, because I love a good conspiracy theory, I wanted to do research in hopes of effectively communicating the, quote, conspiracies to you so you can make up your own mind. Whether you agree with me, whether we agree at all, I don't care. I just want you to have the information. But if you're a regular here on the show and you're like, I don't care about Luigi Mangione, I just want to get to underreported stories, remember, you could always use the chapter feature to skip forward to our top 5 stories. But anyway, in terms of Luigi Mangione, I asked you guys, please explain the conspiracy theories to me, and like the real ones you are, we had a listener named Abby Rockwell comment on Tuesday's show. Yes, I do read all the comments, as many as I can. And Abby's comment really opened my eyes as to going down this conspiracy rabbit hole. Let me pull that up. So Abby's comment reads, in regards to Luigi, things with this are just not adding up for me. I certainly don't agree with deleting a man who was just doing his job. I can understand why a health insurance CEO is a target, though. There, I just want to just note one word here. Apathy. People are very generally apathetic about this. There are some deletings, as we'll call them, that are very difficult for people, and it's sad, it evokes a ton of emotion. Generally speaking, whether you think that this active vigilantism is justified or not, the general feeling from people who do think it is unjust is a little bit more apathy than you would expect. And I have noticed that. I've definitely taken note of that. Abby went on to say, the pew-pew he had on him did not have a threaded barrel, meaning it could not have had a suppressor on it. He was gone for 5 whole days and he only got 1 state away. Now, that's very interesting. Gun folks, can you check that for me? Because that would be very, very weird. This is another thing about mainstream media reporting, and I will actually sadly put myself in this. I understand the basics of a firearm. I know how to shoot one. I understand how they operate, like the very basics of it. I know that an assault rifle is like the dumbest term ever. I understand the basics. I do not understand whether that is true or not. Like, it would go over my head. I need to probably text somebody that does know and get back to you, because that makes no sense to me. The part about the 5 whole days he only got 1 state away, that to me, I read it and I was like, no, actually it would make sense that he didn't get very far or couldn't get very far. Again, if you are trying to evade traffic cameras, because you never know if they'll get your license plate and be able to track your car. You don't know how he was getting around. You don't know how difficult it is to commute or travel, I should say, when you're trying to evade law enforcement, but generally just detection overall. So that one I was kind of like, maybe not. This one says, and why do the pictures that were originally released of him with the mask look nothing like the man in the hostel and the man in the taxi? What is happening in the world that we aren't hearing about because of this? But also, how do we know so much about this guy and still know barely anything about the attempted assassins of Trump? I just have so many questions, and I don't think have sure answers. I totally get that sentiment. I really do, because, like, why do we know so much about this guy? Nothing about the Trump assassin. It feels like all the digging that we've done on Luigi Mangione has been done by investigators and reporters and not by the FBI. They've been no help. In fact, they've been a hindrance. I totally get that. To the pictures, again, I'm like 50-50 bought in on that. I see it and I'm like, I see what you see, but I also kind of see it. I look different in some angles. I look at a picture of myself, I'm like, that's me? Do I look like that? I don't know. Something about that. I'm like, I'm very 50-50. I can be bought over. Try to convince me. Try to show me something. Comment some pictures. I'm just not 100% there yet. I don't know what it is. But I'm really appreciative for comments like this because I'm just trying to understand. Like, my goal is not to come to a conclusion and tell you, well, you must think this way. I think this way. Come think this way. That's never the goal of this show. I was just trying to get the other side so I could provide it for you. And there's another tweet thread I'm going to pull up right here. Let's move us over here. This one is from Peruvian Bull, and it went mega viral. And when I say viral, I don't mean like a million views. 49 million views about his conspiracy about Luigi Mangione. And this is what it reads, okay? Let me get this straight. Killer is Luigi Mangione, Ivy League grad with degrees in computer science, avid reader, and active contributor on GitHub. What is GitHub? Let me look that up really quick. What is GitHub? A developer platform that allows developers to create, store, manage, and share their code. Oh, okay, so it's like a software engineering type thing. Cool. Way over my head. He has an IQ of 130 plus, but he takes off his mask at a Starbucks to flirt with an employee. Then an hour later goes and calmly kills the CEO of a major healthcare company who rides away on a bike. A week later, goes to a local McDonald's where he brings the murder weapon, the fake ID he used to check into a hotel, and a written manifesto on how horrible the American healthcare system is. He somehow gets identified by the cashier after he sits down. He works on his laptop until police come inside the McDonald's, sitting there with a ghost gun and suppressor he made himself. Gotcha. Again, I think, you know where my problem really lies? And sorry if this is very inarticulate because I'm thinking about this on the spot. Like, really on the spot. There are a lot of conspiracy theories out there. We have drones, like, flying over New Jersey right now. We have everything that went with coronavirus, right? You're telling me that you willingly took a vaccine, but this is the hill you're going to die on? Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I get your conspiracy theories now. I am more conscientious, and what's the word I want to use? Like, trepidatious of what the FBI is telling us now more than I was 2 days ago. And thank you. I appreciate that. Sometimes you need a good little conspiracy theory to kick you in the butt and wake you up, right? Totally here for it. Again, I find it so odd that we live in a world where everyone happily jabbed themselves with an experimental vaccine, but we're going to get conspiratorial about this guy. I don't know why. It just strikes me as odd of all things we're going to get up in arms about, that this is the hill we're going to die on. And again, if this is red pill moment for people, I don't know if I should say, like, I guess we'll take it. But I'm just like, you see what I'm saying? Okay, I don't need to go on. Like, you get what I'm trying to say. I find this to be the weirdest hill to die on personally. What I will thoroughly admit as well is I don't think that this is a clean-cut case for the FBI, because the theories are showcasing to me that something's not entirely adding up. The manifesto as well, I think I might talk about it on my socials. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm having like this moral qualm where I'm like, I've said his name a bajillion times. Like, I'm clearly giving this guy internet fame. the whole world is giving him internet fame. It's not just on me, but I'm like, do I want to read this manifesto on the internet? I don't know. I'm like split right now. So let me decide and I'll get back to you. But anyway, laid it all out there for you as best as I could. You decide, but let me know, where do you land? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely interested. This is a judgment-free zone. What is it? We listen and we don't judge. If you're not on TikTok, consider yourself lucky. Anyway, the last thing I'll say about the online discourse about Luigi Mangione, by the way, is I brought up the word apathy because I think it's true that there is a nonpartisan divide between like this was good and this was bad, or the vigilantism was warranted versus it wasn't. What is interesting, though, and again, I just want to hark on that word apathy, is that when I talk to people on the right side, the working class right, they're very apathetic about the whole thing. They're like, well, he did do a lot of awful things to a lot of people, and I don't think it's right, but, it's like a very apathetic tone. Again, not saying I agree here nor there. I'm just saying that's the tone I've noticed. And the difference I've seen between the apathetic right and the left, and this goes from the elite right to the the elite left to the working class left, is that they look at the death of Brian Thompson and go, yeah, that's awesome. This is joy. Like, they're literally gleeful at his death. And I think that difference tells me a lot about the sides, because I can understand why you might feel apathetic about this. I struggle to understand how someone could feel gleeful about death. I've seen the conversation about Daniel Penny lumped in a lot, and while people are gleeful about him getting off on charges, no one is gleeful about the death of Jordan Neely. There's a difference, and then I'm seeing it all over social media. So it's just an interesting caveat to have. Anyway, let's get into our docket for today. This is what we're going to talk about, the actual stories. So a UCLA student was allegedly kicked out of class for voting for Donald Trump. There's a video that does a whole deep dive explainer. We're going to get into that. Ladies Golf has updated its transgender policies. And then there's also some drama with Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace being allegedly assaulted, and then kind of pushback saying it's all a lie. So we'll get into that. I'll let you decide where you lie on that. Plus, Daniel Penny speaks out for the first time. I do not have time to do all the research on everything to do with the New Jersey drones, but just know that I am keeping an eye posted. I don't have enough information to put out a whole section or video on this, but I will probably put out something in terms of short form content on that in the next 24 hours. So keep your eye peeled. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. Today's show is brought to you by Based, my merch line, and we've just unveiled our winter line with a new beanie, a hoodie, a shirt, and a tote bag. I'm an independent creator, and one of the best ways, if not the best way, to support this show is by purchasing my merch line that represents your views. Instead of just asking you guys for donations to fund my independent journalism, my business partner and I created a line of merch called Based Apparel. Based basically means the opposite of woke. It means you're based in logic, based in truth, based in facts. You get it. Anyway, head over to basedinlogicapparel.com to check out our latest apparel. My personal favorite right now is our Based two-tone shirt, which I'm wearing right now. And remember, when you buy merch, you are directly supporting this show. And when you get your apparel, please be sure to tag me on Instagram so I can repost. A UCLA student was reportedly kicked out of class for voting for Donald Trump. The professor, or I guess it was a teaching assistant, was arguing to this girl that the class needed time to mourn the loss of the country. So she was kicked out of the class because it's some sort of safe space in academia. This girl's name is Avery Warwick. She posted a video explaining what happened to her. Now, this did take place back in 2016, but she's sharing the story for the first time. It has been shared online as if it very recently happened. It did not. This happened back in 2016. But again, she's never shared this story, and it's so emblematic of what we saw beginning in academia in 2016 and replicated through academia for 8-9 years now.
Story time. I went to UCLA and I was there in 2016 when Trump was elected, and we're on the quarter system, so it's only 10-week classes. And in the middle, he got elected during the week 5, which was midterms. And all of my professors gave all of the students, a safe space and time off from school if they wanted to heal and quote unquote mourn the loss of our country. That's literally what they emailed us and would say.
That's so crazy, but that is so on brand with 2016. I remember there were, like, marches at Michigan State. People that's where I went to college. Just, like, marches down the street of, like, people protesting and then also crying and then sit-in sessions, and we did see this again in 2024. It was, like, the most elite universities, Yale, Georgetown, all those big name schools, like Ivy League schools, Harvard, blah, blah, blah. They held these, like, safe spaces for people to cry and gave crayons and milk and cookies to the students, and, like, they're adults. They do not need milk and cookies to cope with their problems. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I would love some milk and cookies if I had a bad day. I'm just saying the school does not need to be providing that and then coddling them and then telling them that it is appropriate to act this way about the results of an election.
Um, this lasted from week 5 to week 7. And so in one of my classes in week 7, I was in a small group, like teacher's assistant discussion. And those were mandatory. And I was there as like 25 people. And all we did was just talk about, everyone was crying, right? And I didn't say anything. I just sat there. I listened. I was respectful. I was quiet. And then
This girl is so much nicer than I would be. I would be rolling my eyes at these idiots. You're crying in class. This is not the appropriate time or place. This is why I'm gonna go on, like, a little bit of a rant. This is why we keep hearing about these claims of, like, A, lot of people on ADHD medication, and B, everyone getting diagnosed with, quote, autism. It's because nobody is learning social cues because the social cues are, like, turned into norms. What normally would be very weird to go to your teaching assistant small group and cry in front of people is now acceptable. If I did that, if I cried and so I would feel so embarrassed. And that's not to say there aren't spaces where that is appropriate now, maybe more than it was in times past. I get it. We're developing, we're becoming more empathetic people. I'm cool with that. It's just like weird to go to a school space, a space that's meant for academia, a space that is meant and intended for critical thinking and discussion, that we would assume that everyone around us is just like in our little coddle bubble. It's weird. It is weird when you actually break it down to its studs.
TA said, Avery, we haven't heard from you. How are you coping with this? And I said, well, I'm doing well. I voted for Trump and I think this is going to be a great 4 years. And
That was a bold statement, girl. I mean, in 2016, it was different. In 2024, you say that you're gonna get somebody that's, like, a little angry or whatever. In 2016, man, that was a different beast. People were a lot more crazy. I was just on Lara Trump's show earlier this week, and we were chatting about how it just feels different this time around. Last time you got really lambasted in 2016 for believing in him, and you still do. They'll call you names, but they don't have as much standing ground, and the overwhelming success of Donald Trump's election this time around, it kind of changed the dynamics of, like, it was such a close race last time. This was such an overwhelming sweep that it's very difficult to look at people and say, "You're wrong for this." It's like, well, the majority of people voted for this. So, anyway.
I'm here to learn. I'm not here to talk about politics. This isn't a poli sci class. And I got kicked out of the class. I was told to leave that class and not return for the remainder of the quarter because
Girl, you pay for this. Like, you pay for the class. The class is supposed to assist you. You are supposed to learn from the class. You can't get kicked out of something you pay for. This isn't like you messed up at Orange Theory and yelled at a coach. Like, this is a collegiate level staffer that is supposed to be helping and assisting you to get educated. What?
I was, quote unquote, a threat to my fellow students' safety because they voted for Donald Trump. I was a threat to their safety. I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. I literally just shared that I voted for him because I was asked. That was when I was like, this is insane. These people need to be stopped.
They do. They're absolutely nuts. 100%, you're justified in feeling very frustrated by these people, very irritated by them, because this is nuts. You don't silence people. In fact, if the teaching assistant actually had any intention of teaching people, what he should have done, or she, I don't know what the gender of them was, they, it, I'm kidding. That's messed up. But this individual should have taken the time to say, oh, well, everybody else in this room doesn't believe that. Maybe let's try to understand why you did it, why you voted for him. Enlighten us. And obviously, it would have led to maybe a little bit more, I don't know. I could see it leading to a devolved discussion, but if you're a good professor, you can have an honest and thoughtful and thought-provoking conversation about this. And I think that just goes to the state of education right now, that this individual can't do that. That this teacher, this girl, she's so brave, Avery. You're a rock star, girl, if this video ever gets to you.
We cannot be silent anymore. And I only started posting on TikTok 3 weeks ago. So if you have the fire in your belly, go for it. Because they're going to hate you anyway.
That's so true. And that comment in and of itself reminds me of that Caitlin Clark story that's going very viral right now about her saying that she has white privilege. If you haven't heard it, Caitlin Clark was nominated as Times Athlete of the Year. And she was like, thank you so much. I worked so hard for it. But also, it's because of my white privilege. I'm like, girl, they're going to hate you whether you acknowledge that you have white privilege or not. So don't go, giving yourself up to the woke. They're never going to like you. They're never going to accept you. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about this. If you have similar experiences, also, please drop them in the comments. I really love hearing about this. Kind of one of the stories I always share on my platforms is that when I graduated college, people in the Antifa group at school booed me as I walked across the stage. It was an interesting time, especially if you were in college between 2016 and 2022. Recent graduates, I know you guys have been through it. But anyway, let's get into our next story because this story's nutso. Ladies Golf updated its policies on transgender identifying players, and it's kind of wrecking the left. And it's very interesting to watch because I believe, I'm going to provide you with all the facts, but I believe this is a really fair analysis or policy given the sphere that we're in. Not saying I 100% agree. I'm just saying it's, quote, fair. So the policy is the LPGA and the USGA. So these are both the governing bodies for women's golf. They announced that in order to compete in LPGA tour events or any event under these governing bodies, individuals have to be biologically female or have transitioned pre-puberty. So we're not having men that undergo full male puberty and then decide at the age of 35 that they're going to be women and then coming in and competing in the female category. And, maybe they competed in the male category and now they're going to compete. No. No more of that. We don't have people failing upwards by going from the PGA to the LPGA. That's done. If a similar policy, by the way, were put in place for collegiate athletics, specifically collegiate women's swim, then Leah Thomas would have never swam. Just to give you a broad scope of how many people this policy axes. Now, the catalyst for this policy change came after 275 female golf players reportedly signed a letter asking those governing bodies to change policies that allow biological males to play against biological females. And I think there's a lot of power in that. Knowing that these notes, these letters, this commentary that we do, it is not going unnoticed right now. Because a lot of the times when we talk about, especially trans stories, I really feel like they go over people's heads and we're like, yeah, I've heard this a lot. Yeah, I know it's a growing problem and I don't agree with it. But the fire under people's bellies that we had 2-3 years ago, it starts to dissipate when you hear the same story over and over and over again. And I don't blame people. You get fatigue. It's very natural. But I just thought it was really cool to see those steps that are they're kind of routine now when something like this happens in the LPGA with men being in women's spaces. To see that those steps ultimately came together with or culminated in women rallying together and then leadership somewhat listened, I think that's really awesome. It's not a full victory, but it's more of a victory than we've seen thus far. Although, let me caveat this. There's a little bit of a plot twist in the story because actually, the commissioner of the LPGA suddenly announced she was resigning on December 2nd and then put these guidelines out on December 4th. So, underreported story to the underreported story, I'm just very curious whether this was her Hail Mary moment, just kicked the majority of the biological males out of the women's sports. She knew she was going to get backlash for it. So, but she also knew it was the morally correct thing to do. So she decided she was going to leave, but then she also knew she was going to implement this policy as kind of her last, FU to men trying to take over women's sports. Now, here's all the sides I've been hearing so that you can kind of make up your own mind where you fall. But some people think that the LPGA is obviously not going far enough. No, men, you were born with a male genitalia, you're born a male, you're not in the female sports. And I understand that. So it should be an outright ban on all biological males. There are also some people, and I think I myself probably fall into this category, that think the ban would be necessary, not necessarily because people who don't undergo male puberty, like not for the scientific reasons, but for the cultural and societal implications that it have because allowing a biological male who transitions at a young age, I think what it does is it encourages parents to transition their children younger in hopes of giving their children a better shot at getting into sports or something like that. So I think there is a backlash that comes with this. If you aren't brave enough to do the all-out ban, I just wish you would, I think is where my head's at. Because when you do this, when you provide people an alternative, it really just encourages more minors to transition. And if we've seen anything, it's that minors, more than adults, have a lot of regret about those transitions. So that's kind of where I stand. But there are other people out there that obviously do think that this policy is far too harsh. There is a very prominent female identifying golfer who is a biological male, goes by the name Haley Davidson. Well, Haley Davidson has been very successful on the LPGA tour, or maybe it's the NXT, one of the subsequent LPGA tours or USGA governed tours. She's no longer going to be able to compete because of these new guidelines. So we're kind of seeing people fall off that were allowed to compete in LPGA no longer being allowed to. But let me know, where do you fall on this? Do you think that this is good? Do you think this is bad? Do you think it's that the LPGA didn't go far enough? And if we're going to get all conspiratorial, why do we think that the commissioner of the LPGA just poof dropped out of her role all of a sudden? It strikes me as odd. It really does. All right, let's get to our next story. Speaking of odd, things that I think people just need to know the full story before we get into it, but it has been reported that Capitol Police arrested a 33-year-old activist who allegedly physically accosted Congresswoman Nancy Mace in the House of Representatives. I believe it was the Rayburn building, so one of the buildings that houses the staff offices for the House of Representative-elects. So, following the arrest of this individual, Mace tweeted that she was physically assaulted at the Capitol by a, quote, pro-trans man. Now, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was kind of expecting like a crayon head, like a pink or purple haired person to be the assaulter. That's not the case. But this led people to believe that the alleged assault took place over Mace's controversial bill because she just recently put out a bill saying that only biological women are allowed in women's bathrooms on Capitol Hill after a transgender individual was elected to Congress. So that's kind of how this all wraps it up. What's interesting, where the story takes a twist right now, is that eyewitnesses claim that Nancy Mace made this entire assault claim up, and all that transpired was just a, quote, normal handshake. Now, where I will caveat this is that the eyewitnesses work with the individual who allegedly assaulted Mace. So stick with me. The person that assaulted Mace, it's that person's colleagues. The colleagues are the eyewitnesses who said nothing happened. But media, I had a write-up of it. Media, I don't always trust, but this is at least their side of the story. So let me start with the tweet that Nancy Mace initially put out. It says, I was physically accosted at the Capitol tonight by a pro-trans man. One new brace for my wrist and some ice for my arm, and it'll heal just fine. The Capitol Police arrested the guy. Your trans violence and threats for my life will only make me double down. FAFO, which means F around and find out. So that's the version that she put out. But like I said, and this is her for those in the viewing audience, she's got her cast on. She's got some sort of like sling. For those in the listening audience, she's wearing a sling on her right arm. But one eyewitness to this claims that The only physical contact that happened between the duo was a handshake. Mace shared the news on social media that she was obviously accosted. However, somebody from the imprint said that a former foster youth and award-winning advocate for children was arrested at the U.S. Capitol tonight. Now, I don't know if I've told you guys this theory. I've had to have. I talk way too much to have not told you this theory. That I think that when people overly advocate for things, they're usually guilty of something. Like men that advocate for being so pro-women, they love women, like they're always guilty of some sort of like assault charge. It's like a coping mechanism. So I don't want to say this across the board. It's not. I just sometimes when I hear like a former foster youth and award-winning advocate for children, I'm like, there are two ways this is going. He was either in the foster care system and advocating for something he went through, or is a perv. Like, there's no in between. I don't know why I feel this way. I think it's just been my life experience of like, these people are either fighting for something because they wholeheartedly believe it and they've gone through something that like pushes them to do this. I don't think people just like wake up one day and go like, I'm going to be an advocate for foster youth unless something happens. I don't know how to put it. It's just like a social construct I've created in my mind. But anyway, back to the story instead of my rant. It says a former foster youth and award-winning advocate for children was arrested. A bizarre twist in otherwise a celebratory day of events. The event took place at the House of Representative offices, where following an event honoring the anniversary of a landmark child welfare law where Nancy Mace had given a speech. So she was speaking at this event. 3 witnesses at the scene said their accused colleague, his name is James McIntyre, had done nothing more than shake the Congress member's hand at the House reception and asked her to protect the rights of transgender people. A spokesperson said, I want to express deep disappointment in the fact that Congresswoman Nancy Mace came to a national foster youth event, told participating youth that it was a safe space, and literally had one of them arrested by Capitol Police for simply shaking her hand and asking about trans rights. That strikes me as very dishonest. I want to express deep disappointment in the fact that a congresswoman came to a national foster youth event, told participating youth that it was a safe space, and had one of them, youth. James McIntyre's 33 years old, by the way. Or 36, one of the two. It's in this article somewhere. I'll get you the right number. He's 33 or 36, not a youth, okay? Had them arrested for simply shaking her hand. We don't know that to be true. Again, we don't know. I could have sworn somewhere that I saw he was like 33 or 36 years old. 33-year-old James. Yep, there we go. Okay, so obviously the Capitol Police arrested him. I will say my speculation here is that Capitol Police are not just out here arresting anybody, or they're very conscientious of this and they arrest maybe more than they should because they're out there dealing with threats against congresspeople. I don't know. I could see it both ways, but I've posted about this on my social media and pretty much everybody has said the same thing. There has to be video footage of this. If this story is true, it would be the first physical threat for Nancy Mace. But if you didn't know this, she and her staff have faced online death threats for her vocal support of keeping bathrooms sex segregated, like men in men's bathroom, women in women's bathroom. But I'm holding, as Ariana Grande and that annoying interviewer said, I'm holding space. I am keeping my mind open for both opportunities that Nancy Mace maybe exaggerated the story or this guy did physically accost her. I will keep an open mind. However, I am very, very interested in seeing video footage. Also, I was having a conversation with somebody in my Instagram comments about this story, and somebody was like, I thought we believed all women. I was like, yeah, unless they're Republican, of course. You can't forget that caveat, right? Because if a Democratic congresswoman said somebody accosted her, we would believe it. We'd have to believe it. There's no conversation for nuance. You wouldn't have liberal creators on the opposite side of the spectrum holding space for the idea that, maybe she's lying. I don't know. You don't have a lot of that on the other side. Anyway, let's get to our next story. Because Daniel Penny, the man who was just very publicly acquitted of murder charges for his chokehold that was intended to subdue a man threatening people, but resulted sadly in that man's death. Well, Daniel Penny is speaking out for the first time in a Fox News interview. Now, I have not watched this. I saved it to watch and react with you for the very first time, so feel so honored. I'm kidding. Let's watch this.
I mean, I'm not a confrontational person. I don't really extend myself. And like this type of thing is very uncomfortable. All this attention and limelight is very uncomfortable. And I would prefer without it. I didn't want any type of attention or praise, and I still don't.
I get that. I think it's really hard to make that statement while you're on a Fox News interview. I will say that. I will caveat that. Just saying, I'm giving to give credence to both. Um, However, Daniel Penny, his big theory here is that he doesn't really expect people. Well, I wouldn't say expect people to apologize, but like he doesn't seem to have a lot of regret over it. And I think that that's very bold of him and very courageous of him because I mean, what resulted was sadly a murder. And to know deep in your bones that what you did was saving other people and it wasn't just a life going for no reason for alleged racism. Like, deep in your bones that I think you really have to believe that to come on and do an interview if you genuinely don't like the limelight.
The guilt I would have felt if someone did get hurt, if he did do what he was threatening to do, would never be able to live with myself. And I'll take 1 million court appearances and people calling me names and people hating me just to keep one of those people from getting hurt or killed.
That's a very humble man. A very humble man says that. Because what he went through was hell. I wouldn't want to. Wasn't he was sitting in jail for this is not a new story. Like, this has been ongoing. And he's watched other people who've committed worse crimes or real crimes, if that's what you believe, and just get away with it while he sat and rotted in a prison cell or jail cell awaiting trial. Not allowed, denied bail. I don't know. They painted him out to be a lot scarier than he even comes across in the interview. He comes across as very sweet and naive. That's the feeling I get, at least. But I know this is very contentious. I understand that people have a lot of strong feelings, and I have been seeing on social media a lot of people comparing Daniel Penny to Luigi Mangione, and I'm like, these are not the same people. This does not align, and people are like, oh well, we're not allowed to celebrate Luigi Mangione, but you can celebrate Daniel Penny. I'm like, I'm celebrating Daniel Penny getting off on charges. I'm not celebrating the death of Jordan Neely. That's sad. I wish the chokehold had simply subdued him, not killed him. I think that's awful and tragic. At the same time, I just don't see the parallels necessarily. This was an ongoing active threat, Jordan Neely, to other people around him, and somebody took action to save in the moment. What happened with Luigi Mangione and Brian Thompson is different in that yes, you could see him as a perceived threat. I understand why you draw that parallel. It was not an act of violence in the moment that Luigi Mangione was saving people from. It's different. It is. And if you can't understand that or you don't believe that, I don't think you're being intellectually honest. But let's get to our final story, which really I don't think anybody's talking about anywhere. So, a Chinese national illegally registered to vote in Michigan. And it's been reported that his vote was counted in the 2024 election. He is currently facing 2 felonies. The Federalist has the full story. All right, so this story reads that a Chinese student in Michigan is facing charges for ineligible voting, yet he is still on the state voter rolls, even though this whole charge is coming forward. And I believe, I'll double check, but I would believe that some of this would have to come from the Secretary of State, who's like a liberal lesbian. So for him to still be on the state voter rolls, even after you'd have to have someone pretty far left pushing this, that strikes me as weird. I am not going to try and pronounce this name. His last name is Gao, so I'm going to go with Gao, okay? He's a 19 years old. He's a legal resident, but he's a Chinese citizen and thus not eligible to vote. He was studying at the University of Michigan. That's where he went wrong. Sorry. Continuing on. Serious journalisming over here. Well, anyway, he was studying at Michigan when he allegedly voted on October 27th of 2024, according to a press release from the Secretary of State's office. Okay, just had to read a little bit more. Yes, okay, this woman is like a diehard leftist. So, yeah, no, if this charge is being pushed by Secretary of State of Michigan, it's probably true. I'm just going to say that off the bat. Gao faces 2 felony charges, one of false swearing to register to vote and an unqualified elector attempting to vote. But officials still counted his ballot. The Federalist has learned Gao is still on the state voter rolls, according to qualified voter data. Again, these names. The co-founder of the group said that the data gets Freedom of Information Act requests through the State Bureau of Elections, and that's kind of how they double-check that this individual did do this. Gao reportedly registered and voted on October 27th, listing an address on Observatory Street in Ann Arbor, according to the data. To vote with a provisional ballot, the state accepts a student identification card to satisfy both proof of ID and residency, according to a notice. So, basically, the state doesn't require maybe sufficient voter ID laws or sufficient proof of residency, or not even residency, proof of citizenship, to the point that the state was accepting student identification cards to satisfy the burden of proof of ID and proof of residency, took him at his word, and then was unable to actually verify his citizenship and let him vote. Now, here's a caveat I have to this. He very well may be guilty, and I'm totally cool with that if that's the case. However, I've been on college campuses in this state. I've been to the University of Michigan, and around election time, at least my experience in 2016, it was the most annoying time possible. Everyone's running around with their little clipboards and offering you, like, maybe I'm wrong, they were offering like those squish stress balls if you like registered to vote. Like, people would do anything to get you to register to vote on campus. They were like these little activists. They all looked the same. They had like their beanies and they were just kind of like ugly soy boy men. And they would run around with their little clipboards and try to get you to sign up to vote. And then some of them would even offer, I mean, we didn't really have like early voting was not as much of a thing, but they would offer to like pick up your ballot from your dorm or your house or the sorority or wherever you were. So I'm just saying there is a world in which this guy thought, like, didn't know that because he was I don't want to say the word holding space. I don't know how you couldn't know. I think that's like borderline delusional to not know, but I could see the incentives on the campus being, you're virtuous for going to vote, you should go to vote, do anything to go to vote. I remember this summer in Detroit, I asked a guy, should we have voter ID? He's like, I don't care who you are, what you are, if you're illegal, vote, 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 vote for Kamala. It was the funniest thing. I wish I could post the clip. I'm not going to get into why I can't post it, but absolutely nuts that he said that. I was like, you are wacky people. So I think, again, I think it's wrong in every scenario, but I could see a world in which he was pushed into it by those self-righteous pricks over at the University of Michigan. Sorry if you went to, there are plenty of wonderful people that went to the University of Michigan. I'm just giving you guys shit. Anyway, before we wrap up today's show, I have a bonus story for you guys because this Christmas ad from Google has been unveiled and we've got to talk about it. For copyright reasons, I'm only going to play the first like 10, 11 seconds of this, but it is linked below if you are interested in watching the whole clip for whatever godforsaken reason.
So dry. This winter dryness is not it, especially when I have so many holiday looks to pull off. Thankfully, I know just the thing. And it's in stock nearby.
Okay. Take away the identity politics of all of this, because that was very clearly, if you're in the listening audience, you probably could tell that was a biological male doing this commercial. Take away that aspect, still not a good commercial. Like, I could see a brand doing this in June, right? To try to like get away with the whole pride thing, like they're just trying to buy into anything to get and win people over. They don't want to be controversial. They just want to do what they're told by the woke, right? But this was a bad investment for a commercial, even if there was a biological woman doing this. It was just a bad commercial, right? And the other thing here that, like, the real point I'm trying to make is that Christmas commercials are like a slam dunk. Even if I totally agreed with Pride commercials, I would look at this and I would go, this is, bruh, Christmas commercials, this is the easiest thing in the whole wide world. You are going to have a slam dunk commercial in November and December if you put out a heartwarming family commercial or funny commercial relating to the vast majority of Americans about rushing to get something done before the holiday season. That is sweet. It is adorable. You will build a ton of brand awareness. We just saw this happen with Apple, very notably put out one for their new AirPods about a dad who wanted to hear his daughter sing and utilized the headphones which now have a hearing aid. It made me cry. Publix has been putting out these very sentimental commercials. I'm not kidding you, I cry almost every single time. You can build brand awareness without buying into the cult or putting out a string of campaigns that mock people's identity, specifically women's identity. This is weird to me. It really is. It's a bad, low-budget commercial. If you want to do, and it's also lazy. That's the other thing, too. It's a lazy commercial. You gotta put anybody in there. You're like, you know what, let's just throw a trans person in there and that'll win us some points. Like, that is laziness at its finest. Write a good commercial. Get creative. Come on, like, we're better than this. We just are. We're better than this. Anyway, that's all she wrote. It's the end of the show. If you're a real one, if you made it to the end of today's show, will you drop the female golfer emoji in the comments so I know you made it to the end? Have a wonderful weekend, friends, and I will see you back here on Tuesday's show, which next week is our last week of shows, by the way, so for the year. So we'll get 2 more. You'll get a Tuesday, you'll get a Thursday, and then I do have some comments or some content that'll drop over the holiday season, including my wedding video. But in terms of underreported stories, like full shows on the podcast, we will be wrapping it up next week. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday or Tuesday. Yeah, whatever day. Bye. Love you. Mwah.
Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment about how beautiful, stunning, and funny I am. And if you want more content based in logic, be sure to click over here for more videos and clips of my show. If you have the means to financially support the show, consider purchasing from my merch line, Based Apparel, linked right below. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye, friends.